Hello, everybody. I'm Brian Levine. Welcome to the Gould Standard. Today, we have the privilege of speaking to one of the truly universal musical artists of our time. AR Rahman is one of India's national cultural treasures. He is an incredibly prolific composer of film scores for both Tamil and Hindi cinema, and occasionally for Western films as well. But he's also a producer, a concert artist, songwriter, popular musician, and more recently a filmmaker who has ventured into the world of virtual reality. He has composed scores for over 225 films, and his live concerts draw tens of thousands. A concert he and his ensemble gave in Kuala Lumpur earlier this year drew 72,000 fans. He's the winner of just about every award imaginable, from Oscars and Grammys to the National Film Award, Filmfare Award, a BAFTA, and a Golden Globe. He is also a deeply spiritual man and artist who has presented a vision of peace and harmony through his hugely successful concerts of Sufi music, and his universalism is also reflected in the way he seamlessly blends elements and styles from many musical cultures and traditions together. He was named one of the world's 100 most influential people by Time magazine, and on top of that, he is a dedicated philanthropist. Despite his superstar status, he remains a quiet, reflective, and modest man. So I hope he won't be too embarrassed when I say that for Western audiences, it is difficult to grasp the impact, influence, and reverence he inspires in his own country and beyond. We were very lucky to have him as a member of the Glenn Gould Prize jury in 2020, and we're equally honored to have him with us again. Rahman, sir, welcome to the Gould Standard.
Thank you so much. It's a great honor. Come here.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you. Now, just to start us off, I'm always interested in people's origins, how their early life experiences affect their later paths in life and in their careers. And in your case, your father was a composer, R.K. Shakar, a very distinguished and respected composer. And I understand that not only was he active in film scoring, just as you later would be, but that he was a real workaholic, and that he was the kind of person who was dedicated continuously to his composition. But he also died when you were very young. You were, 9 years old?
Yeah, that's correct.
It must have been incredibly hard for you and your family. Can you describe what it was like afterwards? Just trying to keep going.
Yeah, my early life was as a kid. When I was 4 or 5, I used to accompany and take lunch for my father. The studios used to be around 20 minutes away from my house. So my mother used to, and then I used to accompany. I used to watch him conduct and arrange things for other people and his own work. And I think when I was 6 or 7, he fell ill. And the rest of those 2, 3 years were a disaster, actually. Hospital after hospital, spiritual healing, and this, every religion, they tried everything. And he almost, like, when he died, he looks like Gollum. He looked like Gollum, like completely, in a very bad shape. That's one of the reasons why I that memory kind of haunts me. And then the whole cremation thing and everything, when I was 9. So to come out, then I joined the studios as a keyboard player because my father's friends wanted to encourage me and my mother felt like I should take over my father's profession. So I was a roadie. I used to set up equipments for other people when I was young because father had kept some equipments and my mom rented out those things, like the organ synthesizers and stuff.
Right, but I mean, had you had lessons? Like, were you already playing at the age of 9?
Yeah, I was actually learning the piano harmonium, and then I resumed the lessons when I was 12, 13.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was also working. So when I would finish the weekends, I would go to Mr. Jacob John, learn classical piano. Then, of course, I think life teaches you more. Life teaches you
Mm-hmm.
what to do, what not to do, and you learn from working and say, okay, I like this, and I don't want to do in my music. I don't want to do what they're doing. So you learn this in the best university is life.
Yes,
and getting
exactly.
into it. Yeah.
But you were a school-age child as well. So am I right that you were both working in the studio, and then when you weren't working in the studio, you were in school as well?
I was to get all the kind of threats and abuses. In a way, like, any school, they want School is very strict here. Like if you
Yeah.
don't come, you don't get attendance. How would you? That's the question.
Hmm.
And it was difficult for us to explain to the school that
Right.
the house has to be run.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, you were the breadwinner for the family at this point, and that must have been very, very challenging for everyone.
Yeah, yeah. But then I think when I think about it, it is a blessing. Not that I lost my father, but me getting into the nuts and bolts of music and production and film scoring at an early age. And maybe I would have worked in around 300 movies, because those days the scoring was just 3 days. They had the whole orchestra, and then we just get the notes and boom, boom, boom. 3 days, it'll be like 14 reels done. Next movie, and there would be no breaks at all, except for Sundays. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a tremendous training in discipline, in you know, um, being productive with your time and all the rest. So, the work that you were doing then, it was basically for film scoring,
Yeah, I was a
production.
session player. I was a session player.
Uh,
So I would
okay.
play keyboards, and then around 84 end, I'd saved up enough money, and then this thing came, like a music computer from
Hmm.
Yamaha, and I said, I need to get that. And I remember it was $1,000, and it had FM synthesis and composing software, scoring software. It was very primitive. You
Hmm.
literally had, for one note, you had to enter like 6 commands. Gate time, velocity, timbre, and pitch. Yeah.
Has the world ever changed? I don't know if you know, but I always tell this story about how technology has changed. Yet, um, before this, I was part of a record label that I co-founded, and we were always trying to advance the quality of the sound. So we were, I think, one of the first record labels, if not the first, to go from 16-bit to 20-bit recording. But we wanted to edit all of the recordings and keep them at 20 bits and never downsample it. But the problem was storage space, because a 20-bit
Yeah.
file is much larger than 16 bits. And I still remember the day that one of our engineers broke into my partner's office and said, "There's a breakthrough. We can edit at full resolution now. There's a hard drive that's big enough to hold the files. It's 9 gigabytes, but it does cost $12,000."
Oh wow. Yes.
That
Yeah.
was
And
a different world.
yeah, and then those huge hard drives, right, with the power supply, 1 gig. It's 1 gig. So you get,
Yes.
yeah, instead of getting 100, like 10 MB floppies, you get a,
Yes.
yeah, I remember that stuff.
It was terrible, but also wonderful. It just makes us
Yeah.
realize how privileged we are now. When you were doing your session work, I mean, were you also beginning to become familiar with studio production techniques, running the equipment, or was that something that had to wait until you got your music computer?
Actually, what happened was, we had this band out of all the studio musicians. Like, there was a gentleman called Johnny who passed away, then Sivamani and Raja and Jojo. We were kind of sick of studio work. Not sick of studio work, it was like tiring. And
Hmm.
whenever we had time, we would jam and play stuff, which is create our own fusion work.
Hmm.
And though we did just one concerts, El Shankar, who was playing with Shakti, he came in and he said, I want a band. He had a
Hmm.
band called the Epidemics with his wife Caroline that time, and he came and said that, why don't you guys back me up? And then he did a record, and
Huh.
I was there. I was watching a couple of engineers who came in, and like what they were doing, like sampling and looping, and so that kind of was life changing. The moment you
Yeah.
see somebody else work in a different way, whereas we work like 3 days, bang, bang, bang,
Yes.
and suddenly you see, oh, they're doing a song for like a week, and they're just changing it every day, shaping it, like sculpting it. So the
Hmm.
possibilities of song making completely changed. That, and then you read books, and then you read, those days there no YouTube, right? So
Right.
you try to cycle and go to a one bookstore like 45 minutes away, and I'll ask him, do you have this book, Music Maker or Keyboard Magazine, right? And we'll wait for 3 months, and then suddenly three issues will come together, like a jackpot. Then you read
Right.
it.
Right. Right.
I used to sleep. I used to read all the interviews and all the ads, and
Yeah.
from then, yeah,
And of course, like, you turn the page and, oh my goodness, you can do that,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
suddenly, right. Yeah. But interestingly, at around the same stage in your life, you went through a bit of a spiritual transformation as well when you embraced Sufism. And that must have been, quite a dramatic moment in your life and for your family too. What led to that? And because it seems to me from listening to your music and admiring your music that it's something that has been a very powerful influence on your musical path as well.
Yeah, I think it was a very natural kind of a thing which happened. So my father, who was going through various spiritual treatments, we were hoping that something would save him. Towards the end of it, we went to a spiritual Sufi healer also, and he kind of predicted what's going to happen. My father was in pain, so he was not interested. He didn't have any faith in anything. So he treated my mother like a daughter, and he said, "You are so blessed." And she could see many spiritual things in that place, the spiritual healing place. And he said, "You're going to come back after 10 years." And by then, my father passed away. And then we never knew. We forgot about the whole thing. 10 years later, I was getting this equipment from Singapore, and I had a problem with the customs, and it got confiscated, kind of thing. How did you bring it? We're not going to give it. It was like whole Indian customs were very strict that time. It used to be 300% duty. If you buy $1,000, it's actually $3,000. Yeah, it's literally. And we were prepared to give that, and they wouldn't give it. And for some reason, so that's when I think one of his patients, like one of his students, saw me and said, and he went and told him. Then his kind of student worked in the customs or something, so they helped clear it. And then we were very grateful. We went back to him. Is when he kind of everything kind of collided, and then I started my studio. And he blessed it and named it Panchatan. Panchatan is like five holy people of the faith, so connected to Sufism. So there was no, like, nobody told us, oh, you have to come to this faith, and nothing. I was just more peaceful. I felt like something special, like things were working out. The jingles which were rejected, after prayers would get accepted. All that stuff, all that stuff happened, and then I felt like right now I felt like so liberated having my own studio, sitting in a place, and there was a kind of empowerment, like as though I got my own kingdom, even though it was like a small room like this. And slowly, I told my mother, we have to choose. We have to choose which side, And she said, of course, we're going to choose. And then we moved from our old house to the new house, which I have studio now. And so that's a very organic thing. And then things kind of opened up. We were more going to the Sufi shrines and studied. I was getting more interested in the more Gnostic, mystic kind of teachings. And I was fascinated. I would like buy all the books and what is this stuff? And it was so fascinating to see, because it's also an alien culture to Indian culture, right? It's pretty alien to Indian culture. We have, the yoga, we have beautiful things, but something fascinated for me in that. And it's like you knock at a door and then you get an answer, and then you go towards the door, right? So, and strangely, even though there are different ideologies in the same thing, there's a singular thing, like you are um, equal to everyone. There's no superior, there's no white, black, and rich and poor, and this caste and that caste. So what I loved was the equality about, because we all feel intimidated at various stage of life. People put you down, and somewhere you felt empowered that, oh my God, there is something just which is how humanity should be. Everybody's equal, and we are only superior in our deeds, in our thoughts, in our ideals, and not by birth, or by richness or economy and state and nation. So that fascinated me, and actually, that's one thought which made me become fearless about trying new things, fearless about charity, fearless about saying yes, we'll do it. Let's see what happens.
Right.
You know?
Well, that's
So
fascinating. I mean, it sounds as though it was, a completely natural progression for you in your life and in your family's life, because it was your whole family that made the change. Was it, I mean, it also feels somewhat daring from a social point of view to embrace a different faith in, a
mm.
society that sometimes, there's a history sometimes of, religious strife in India, in different parts of India. And I don't know, but was there any kind of a social pressure that created a challenge for you in making this change in your life?
Actually, we didn't feel any kind of, nobody even asked about it. They would come for the music, they will have the food biryani, and there's no such things because of the Indians mostly very open people, especially South. They're very open and they're very embracing, and they're happy people. They want everybody to live and let live, and that's what happened. Even now, I think the past few years have been like strange because of political stuff, but we can see them. They just look through the inner light, and they have the power to look at the inner light. So what's happened to your face? You look so bright. Or what happened to your face? You look dull. And you know exactly what they're looking straight to your heart. And not only just Indians. When I go, good people, they always see the light in other people. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's something that really strikes me about your music making and your concerts is that, you know, you bring together an audience that is from every possible faith and background, and they are all united by the music. And when you're performing your concerts of Sufi music, my sense is that you get an audience that is far from being just people who are in the Sufi faith, but from eh, Hindus and other branches of Muslim faith and even Christians and Jews, that they all basically feel this sort of warmth and embrace of the music making that you create, and that feels like it's something that's very intentional in your music making.
True. I think the product of what you learn is like if somebody studies medicine,
Yes.
the fruit of that is they're going to help humanity. I also feel that your faith or whatever you're learning and whatever you're experiencing, the fruit of that should manifest into good deeds. The fruit of that should be, the upliftment of humanity, to pulling up, the poor, and do whatever you can, sharing knowledge or build things which humanity can, like plant a tree. Nobody knows who planted a tree, but then you all enjoy the shade. And for me, my kids, that's my lesson to my thing. This is our family. My mother was like that. My wife was like that. I am like that.
Hmm.
My kids are going to be like that, and they're already slowly, realizing it. They're very inquisitive about how can we, do better things. How can you?
Right.
It's not about gathering money. It's about
Hmm.
being happy and sharing what we have.
That's very beautiful. Well, let's get back to the practical elements of your career. I'm still trying to visualize what the scramble of trying to attend as much school as you could while being on call for these gigs, and basically, I mean, am I right in saying that you would sit down with a score that you hadn't seen before? You had to basically sight read it all, or and you basically would get like one take or two takes of everything, and then move on to the next cue. And it must have been a scramble, financially and just in terms of keeping up, because, childhood isn't always easy. It's a pressure. Um, I mean, did you manage to feel, were you worried a lot, or were you under stress a lot, or did it just feel like natural?
I did have feelings of like, because the social structures, like if you're not educated and nobody would give the girl to you, you can't get married.
Mhm.
Oh, he doesn't have a job. Oh, isn't
Right.
still a stigma about the film industry.
Yeah.
And because the film industry is also admired the most and also been ridiculed and has stigmatized the most. Oh, he's from the film industry. He'll be
Right.
drinking. He'll be taking drugs. He'll be in debauchery and all this stuff. And then, so somewhere, I think because I have got three sisters and we moved away from the crowd and we set up the studio in the house, everybody was actually treated like a guest and almost like a sister, almost like a brother.
Hmm.
And they were all connected with my family. They would come to my house straight away. Any singer, they'll get food from my mother or have a coffee from my. So this is the first home studio, right? It so it felt like, it didn't feel like a studio. They'll finish, they'll relax, they talk. If I'm sleeping, they'll go talk to my mother, come down, and then I'll have the session. And that's actually a luxury which I've enjoyed in my life. I think I should say that's one of the biggest luxuries, because when you go to
Right.
a studio, the meter is running, you
Hmm.
know and then you have to finish it, and then they say, oh, next client has come, can you get out?
Right.
Or we had to close down, the security is going, can you get out? I never like to stop my creativity. I want to go on. Like, it's a good thing and a bad thing, because people think, oh my god, he doesn't. I work from like evening 6 to morning 6
Hmm.
because I like the peace. The busyness of the city goes, and then you just peaceful.
Right.
And I think I have some of the most amazing people with me, human beings who always been assisting, who always cared and sympathized with my vision and helped me,
Hmm.
run this.
Yeah, and it reminds me of when you described the way you had developed your studio and the kind of home-like atmosphere that you were wanting to create. It reminds me of an experience I had many, many, many years ago when I was taken to a tiny restaurant in the mountains in the French Alps, and the owner of the restaurant came and he basically said to us, "Welcome to my home." He didn't say "Welcome to my establishment." He said, "Welcome to my home. It will be my pleasure to feed you this evening," and so I think that that's kind of a spirit where the work and the life, basically there's no artificial distinction between them.
Yeah,
um, Now, the other thing that really strikes me as very curious is the way you describe the kind of music making that you were doing just to help your family survive, and then moving into your studio, is that there was probably, I mean, my image is one kind of music that was kind of more or less a formula for the kinds of films that were being made, but in your own life and in your music making, you've become very well versed in many different styles. Of the classical traditions, Carnatic music, Hindustani music, as well as Western music, pop, rock, fusion, jazz, rap. How did you begin? Well, particularly within the family of Indian classical music, to develop that kind of breadth of reach, because the styles are so different between the North and the South, the Carnatic and the Hindustani.
yeah. So Hindustani, Carnatic, it's there because it's there in the air. You play that, and then you play a song. You learn the raga. So
Hmm.
there's songs, film songs, also based on raga based. But because we're so much into it, I always felt like I should not listen to that stuff. I should listen to what's happening around the world. So when I used to go to London or anywhere else, I would just go to the world music section and pick, African and like Bali stuff, and so just curious about what's happening there, and that kind of helped me to imagine there's another sound there waiting.
Hmm.
And if I play a taiko in an Indian style, it sounds Indian,
Right.
and it doesn't have to be the taiko style, but the
Right.
instrument can create an Indian kind of a sound with a more spectrum of bass and all the stuff. So that, because of samples and because of my knowledge or whatever experience with the samplers, it was a very easy. I wouldn't even think twice to use a taiko in a classical song.
Right, right,
And
right.
get there.
And I've noticed that it's very interesting, in terms of your treatment of certain kinds of rhythms and the use of, you know, um, different rhythmic instruments, that it feels both, an extension of what I think of as, traditional Indian music, even pop Indian music or Bollywood music, but at the same time, it really feels very comfortably Indian in flavor. So it's really kind of interesting the way you've managed to introduce those elements, but make them feel like they're natural extensions of the Indian, character.
Yeah, I think what I figured out is people here are in a way naive and yet open. They don't, kind of box you. Oh, this guy is South Indian or North Indian.
Right.
So what's nice is like you can have a really jazz progression movement. You can do anything, but if you have a Indian language, thinking that it's telling a thought, hey, why are you looking at me like that? Simple. That becomes an Indian song because
Right.
the lyric and the tune drives it, and they care about the backing, and you see that even in the 60s and 50s,
Mhm.
people like R.D. Burman, they also got influenced, like MSV. They had jazz players from Goa, and they had done stuff like that to their capability with
Right.
live instruments. So I said, why not? Why not upgrade that to today's stuff? And
Mhm.
so you can have an amazing chord progression. Nobody's going to question you. Where did they learn that in this movie? As
Right.
long as the lyric is driving that. So that's a trick which I felt like I can get away with in even African music, But if
Mhm.
it's got an Indian lyric and if it's
Right.
catchy, I can just change the framework and that'll take us to a different kind of a zone. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. And now there's one other episode in your early educational experience that also fascinates me, which is your time going to Trinity College in London, where you became immersed in Western classical music, if I'm not mistaken. How did that come about, and what was it like? Did you feel like a bit of a fish out of water? Was it a culture shock to be in this
Uh,
kind of more formal?
so Trinity College of Music was kind of there's a place called Music Musical, and it's one of the oldest shops which sells piano. And the examiners used to come from London. So
Mhm.
we learned from master teachers from Chennai, and then the examination used to be at Music Musical. So the certificates used to come from Trinity College. It's not that I went to London.
Mhm.
So it was education was in Chennai. And later they called me and gave me something like a thing. Yeah.
Oh, okay. But then you were basically doing the Bach and the Beethoven and that
Yeah.
sort of thing as well. So that kind of explains why they sometimes call you the Mozart of Madras, which is
Um, it's a very offensive title because Mozart fans was going to be, hey, why Mozart to this guy?
Now there was another break in your early career because in 1987 you basically stepped away from film writing or from film music and became very focused on jingle writing, on the advertising aspect of music, um, which I take it was really a big sector and flourishing at the time. Why did you make that change? Was it something that you consciously did? Were you trying to make a break or?
So what happened was I got all this equipment, like the sampler, the micro composer, vocoder, and all the stuff, and I finally cleared it from the customs. And I'd left my permanent job from a composer to come out. And my mom was like, "Why did you leave that job? It paid you." I said, "No, I need to be free. I need to have time. I can't work like a slave continuously." And so one day, one of my young two music composers called me and said, "Oh, we love all the stuff you have," and they were paying me like 4 times more. So I said, "No, I don't have to work that much. I just work for 3 days and I have 4 days off." So, and then this 4 days was taken away. Then I was getting into jingles when people came to, "Oh, you have time? Can you do a jingle?" Scratches. So these scratches are actually the building blocks for my what I'm doing now. And here I met very young crowd away from the film older crowd, which is very mature and they were catering to the masses. I met a whole international kind of a crowd where younger people, they would get me tapes from Latin America and Spain and France and all these commercials, and I said, "Oh my god, this is fantastic." And you told me about all the styles I'm doing. The basic foundation was from jingles, because they would give me a jingle which is Latin oriented or bossa nova or a rap or classical. Now to have to replicate it. When you replicate it, you kind of study, analyze what's happening, what are the instrumentation, and it's just 20 seconds, and you kind of figure out, oh, this is it. If you have these instruments, you can get the style. So when I was doing the first movie, it was 20 seconds into whatever, add up to 4 minutes, 5 minutes. So my concentration on each section was, articulate about. And then you realize, okay, you don't have to be like that. You can just autopilot and free run some of the stuff and
Right.
change them.
And
Yeah,
one thing about jingles is you don't have a lot of time, so you have to make your musical
yeah,
point very quickly. And I
catchy.
assume that yeah, to be catchy. So it basically gives you the concept of getting a hook,
Yeah,
and the sort of the negative version of that is the earworm, the thing that you can't get out of your head.
yeah,
But of course, in advertising, that really works because if people are going down the street, whistling the tune for, this chewing gum or that, motor oil for the car, that means that you've basically succeeded in your work. And that presumably is very helpful when you're trying to do hit songs for just as a
absolutely.
songwriter. Yeah.
I mean, that's the basics. That's the whole foundation of what happened in the 90s. So because of that, my focus was with every lyric, give me the hook, give me the hook. And then after a while, you felt like enough of hooks. Let's go deeper into, let's go into harmony change and let's go deeper. And I think, work from 2000, I think you'd see that I was trying to break away from it,
Hmm.
and I was ready to sacrifice the success rate of that, because I said,
Hmm.
I've done that. I know that I can do it. I can come back to it, but I want to see like things like Zubaydah or Lagan and all those stuff. Where like, can I go deeper into music? Can I go,
Right.
can I write an orchestral piece, which is. Then I worked on, Lord of the Rings musical on stage, which
Hmm.
even more, it's very dark. It's a very dark musical.
Yes.
And with working with Matthew Watches, and that actually was the most darkest thing I ever done.
Right, and I want to get to that because it's something that, well, I will get to that because it's a very interesting episode in your career. But staying sort of more or less in sequence, the next sort of big turning point, I think, is the film Roja,
Yeah.
and that's 1992. Was that your first complete film score?
Yeah. I think when Roja came in, like, I know I've said this 1,000 times. Um, Suddenly there was a knock from India's biggest director, Mani Ratnam, and the whole country used to adore him, and everybody would throw anything to go and work with him.
Yes.
And so he comes in, and I didn't know that it was one of my clients' brother, cousin brother. And she said, I was like, what? You never told me this. And so I was going for one of the parties where we won some prize, and then there was a party, and he was there. And I invited him, like, said, can you come to my studio, listen to my stuff? And he was like, yeah, smiled. And six
Yes.
months later, I was in my studio. And then I played him all the stuff I did other than movies and other than commercials, my experimental stuff. And
Hmm.
he was quietly listening to everything. He came back, and then rest was history, right? So,
Right, exactly. And it's a fascinating film as well. It's a love
yeah.
story, but it's set amid kidnapping and terrorists, and and a happy ending finally at the end. But that, I think, was, if I'm not mistaken, that's really when you start to be positioned as a serious film composer, where the person who did this film, we want him for our film, and
Mm.
suddenly you're doing many, 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 many films. So I think the discipline of being able to work very efficiently and quickly must have really paid off when I can imagine people were sort of coming to you every week with a new film project.
So, yeah, so there's dichotomy there. Like, because I was doing films from childhood, like, mine was like, okay, let this be the last film, and then let's go out, do an album. Let
Yes.
me cut off from the film industry, which should make you a slave and make you like a machine rather than an artist. So my thing was, how can I stretch this so that people don't come to me? How can I delay this stuff? How can I reject things so that I can say no? And it's the most toughest thing for Indians is to say no.
Right.
And because we don't want to offend people, and we feel like, oh, that's come, it's given by God, and why should we reject it?
Right.
And I think I managed it well in that whole decade, but then I kind of gave up my diplomacy, and I said, okay, come, let me do it. And
Right.
that's a good or bad thing, I don't know. But a lot of people wanted to work to me. I'm like kind of fulfilling my word. I'll do it later. I'll do it later.
Yeah.
I kind of did this in the past 2 years. I did all the tick mark, and now I can go back to being like, no, I just want to do a few movies and do it
Right.
amazingly
Exactly.
well and do my private thing. Yeah.
And it must be, I mean, when you're in demand that way and people are coming to you, it, I guess there's a question of like, do I only want to do films where, like if I've seen the film and I don't like it, I don't want to write the music for it. Did you ever find yourself in that situation? Like, I don't think this is a very good film, or I don't like the story, or I don't like the message.
Uh, I was not that. I didn't know how to pick music actually. I,
Uh-huh.
I, for me, it's an experience with the director. Whether it's
Hmm.
going the right way or wrong way, I would say add me in it and see what happens, and
Right.
what can I do for the film. People are looking forward to that name. What is AR going to do? What is AR going to? So that
Yeah.
kind of that kind of made me responsible. I never used to think that, oh, this is a big movie, I should do well. This is a small movie, it might not run, so let me mess it up. It was never that. It's my name is there,
Right.
and I have to. There's a faith which people have. I have to keep that faith. I'd work my yeah.
Right. So the calling of professionalism, to
Yeah.
basically maintain a standard that. So one of the things that also I think must be very interesting is, the sort of I'm sure that you were exposed to both, lots and lots of Indian films, but some Western films as well. And the approach to film scoring, I think, is, in many ways different. I mean, in Indian films, songs have a very central role. There are lots and lots of Western films in which there is no song at all, right? That's not just an expectation. It's all, I guess, what you'd call background music. You know, did you feel the sort of the influence of that, you know both the Indian approach and the non-Indian approach in the work you were doing, from seeing films from other parts of the world?
Yeah, definitely. I know that um, here you can. I was trying to gauge myself, like where do I stand, and actually going to London, working with Andrew Lloyd Webber, hanging out in London, going to all those museums and going get my own, food and walking on the streets actually made me realize where I should go,
Mhm.
because they have sense of adulation, which is unprecedented in India at that time. Like 10 years of, oh my God, whatever he touches is great, and this and this and that, and then the other, there were like two people. The other people like, oh, it's all BS. He's not going to last. He's going to be finished in 3 years. He's going to finish in
Right.
2 months. He's going to finish, and that parallelly was happening. But then I was thinking, like, where do I stand? I was pretty clear because
Hmm.
where I should be going, and then in 2000, actually, those trips to London and the world, September 11th happened, and what is my karma? Why am I created? What is the objective of my being? All those
Right.
things, like self-analysis, came in, and then I realized, okay, I have a job to do, and through music, through people, good people around in India and the world, what can we do? Then I started my foundation. Then I started my conservatory, where we're educating kids with Western classical music, underprivileged kids, and then
Right.
foundation, some amazing talent.
And I want to talk about the KM Academy, because it really is an amazing project, and a hugely important example that I think needs to be emulated in other parts of the world. But just going back again, along around the time that your film music career is exploding and you're becoming this enormously popular, enormously sought after, you're also now creating albums, and there are important albums, albums from the films, but also, like very, I would think, something that really is an honor to do, like the, Vande Mataram, in 1997 for the 50th anniversary of independence in India. That must have felt like a real responsibility, especially because, it was connected with, a non-Indian record company, which meant that it was going to travel to the world. Can you tell me a little
Yeah.
bit about that project?
So what happened was, one of the producers who used me for commercials, Bharat Bala, and
Hmm.
so we met. Actually, we lost touch after I became a composer. I was like so swamped with work, I could never meet him. So I think '96 I met him and his wife in Bombay, and so he was saying, in my mind I was like, I should do something other than movies. I should not just depend on this, and because it'll be a good expression, and it's also makes the possibilities of music. So he said, why don't we do something for the 50th year of independence, India? And I said, yeah, let's try something. And then we got Mehboob, the lyricist, and then I'd done an album on Rangila and Bombay with him. So we was jamming, and then the whole concept of what Bharat Bala gave, like for India, Vande Mataram, came in, and I said, this is my album. So the stuff which I'm going to put is my sensibilities, what I believe in. So there's Matuje Salam, the big song. Then there is the revival of the old Vande Mataram song. Then there is Gurus of Peace, because India and Pakistan both at 50th anniversary, right? So he said, why don't you work with Nusrat? Because he knows that I was a big fan of Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. It was the world music icon. And the other side had Only You, which is a very Sufi kind of a song, which talks about annihilation, fana, and how worshipping is not for something to gain something, but just for the sake of, you know, the, purity of worship. And there was also Nafs Magroor Hai, which is a song about um, the bad will or said desire, how you just go against it to open the veils of purity in your heart. So that's another one. Yeah, so that whole album was very strange. Many things coming together. It's like destiny wanted us to do. We came together with Sony, who just signed me for the first time they came in. They signed me for this album, and then suddenly the Sony Global liked it so much that they distributed it all in the world.
And it became a big hit. And it's fascinating though that something that on one level would be seen as a patriotic statement is also such a personal spiritual statement. And the thing that I read, which I find very, very hard to imagine, is that Sony had actually suggested Celine Dion to be a guest artist on the album. Is that
Yeah.
actually true?
Celine was just coming up, and her name was not even there in the radar. And Sony said, "We have this new artist. Do you want to work with her?" And then I heard Celine and said, "I don't find any song which resonates with this. She's a great
Mhm.
singer.
Yeah.
It didn't resonate for this album."
Yes.
And so we kind of declined the offer. But of course, I met Celine and her husband when I was performing for the Oscars. I met
Yes.
both of them. He was very kind.
Yeah. And and it's not a question of the caliber of the artist, but whether they're the right fit for this particular
Yeah, absolutely.
sensibility and project. One of the things that I really admire about you is that you're always exploring. You're always looking for new things, and some of that is in the collaborations that you've done. For example, working with Danny Boyle on Slumdog Millionaire, even though it's an Indian subject, he is obviously an Irish director. The work that you did on Bombay Dreams with Andrew Lloyd Webber, and also, as you mentioned, Lord of the Rings, which because the book itself, the trilogy is actually, you're right, very dark. It has very, very, but it also is sort of the timeless battle of
Yeah,
good and evil,
good neither.
the great quest. There are many themes that really resonate across every possible culture in that work. But you know and in listening to the music, I've been really struck at how beautifully you have adapted to the subject matter, both with the show for Andrew Lloyd Webber and Lord of the Rings, and yet still remained true to yourself and your own artistic character. um, and sometimes these things, when you are taking those chances, work out well and are very successful, which Bombay Dreams was. And sometimes, I'm sorry to say that it was, an experience in my hometown of Toronto that, Lord of the Rings didn't end up being such a big success, which is a pity. Tell me a little bit about, taking those big leaps into completely different worlds, working for, you know, the London West End Theatre and doing Broadway types of things. Did that feel comfortable, or was it a real, I don't know if I can do this, but I'm going to try. I'm going to try. You know.
I think what happened was I had this call from Shekhar Kapoor. Shekhar's movie Bandit Queen screened, I think, in '94, and I watched it and I was blown away. Then we became friends. He wanted to do something with me. It never happened. And one day, I think '99, he called me. He said, "Hey, I'm with somebody very important." I said, "Who?" He said, "Andrew Lloyd Webber." And I just bought Phantom of the Opera like a year back and was listening to the CD, and it's like, "Oh wow." He said, "He's the king of theater and he wants you." And he's never, used another composer for his musicals. Of course, he's a composer and he's produced his own musicals. So the first time, he was the most kindest man. And even now, when he talks about me, he's so kind. So the whole thing was, I'm an introvert. I work in this little room and I teach through playing on the keyboard. Whereas theater is completely opposite. You need to sing, you need to be loud, and you need to be like express yourself, and you can't have inhibitions. I was completely opposite. And so this whole ice breaking or whatever metamorphosis of going into something else happened in Bombay Dreams, and it was successful. In Lord of the Rings, I think what happened was, even though people loved the stuff, the what came in and what was spent was more than what came in. So unfortunately, it couldn't sustain that grandiose production, even though we're all proud of what we achieved on stage. Yeah.
Right. And it was an enormous production. Do you think the fact that the films had come out not that long before
Yeah.
hurt the success? And also, I did a podcast with Howard Shore, who wrote that music, and that was obviously a very successful score. Do you think that those are factors that got in the way of the play
Could be
achieving?
because
Yeah.
could be because even though we never used any of the film's score or anything, it's all fresh.
Yes.
It was trying to. I think sometimes some of the stuff need, if you cramp too much into it, I think I feel emotionally you're not able to take so much. I think it was too much was cramped. Like the
Yes.
movie I did, PS 1 and 2, there are two parts, so you could enjoy. I think a body or biologically you can only take some certain things. If you crammed with too much of things,
Yes.
I feel, yeah, that's what I think happened. You're trying to cram too much in one, and there
Right.
was so many sub stories and so much material to.
And I do have to say that, three novels that are 1,000 pages long, that's pretty hard to get into one evening in the theater.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, it's too much.
Yeah. So let's talk about Slumdog Millionaire, because I think that for some, Western musical listeners, that really was their introduction to you. And,
Yeah,
Jai Ho, the big sort of slightly Bollywoodish, final number was, a big hit, and you got, Academy Awards for the score and so on, but, did it feel somehow different from the work that you had done on Indian films, because it was set in India, it was filmed in India, it was an Indian subject matter, and you're working with an Irish director. What was that all like?
it's strange actually. I was fully swamped with many movies, and I kept getting this mail from Danny. Hey, I'm Danny Boyle. So I googled him and like, oh my god, Danny Boyle's done Train Spotting. He's done this stuff, and all that stuff is touched as gold in music wise. The taste of it. So suddenly felt like I spoke to one of my directors, Ashutosh Gowarikar, who did Lagan. Hey, I want to work with this director, and I can I leave your movie? And he was like, no way you can leave my movie. He's like, I said, okay, okay. Since you're so passionate about it, but next movie you should do. And then I left that movie. And strangely, we were trying to meet for like a couple of months. And one day he said, I got a message say, AR, I'm in Bombay. I said, I'm also in Bombay. And I said, I'm in this hotel. I'm in the same hotel. And let's meet down for breakfast. And then I come down. I met Danny, and he had such great, a beautiful gesture. He said, take this DVD and see what you can do. And he gave me a DVD. And me being me, like, I didn't have time to watch that. A week later, I just put that on. I was like, oh my God, what is this movie? And I called him. I said, this is the same kind of feeling I saw all those, legendary big movies, and I get the same kind of feeling. I said, okay. And he said, it had many other, like picks and like temp music, and said, can I do the whole score? He said, yeah, of course. If you have the, because we're mixing in 2 months, if you can finish the score, yeah. So I started sending him like 80, 90 ideas. He picked out of it. And I just actually spent 2 weeks, just 2 weeks in finishing everything. Never felt like it's going to get an Oscar or anything, because here we do like 130 cues, and then you're just doing 18. But I never knew that those 18 you would keep at the most, exposed beautifully in the movie, where it creates such an impact. So what he did was, for the first time I felt, oh my God, that's what music should be. All the good things we do gets pulled down on the mix, and it's been made into a wallpaper. So that's when I learned what music can do, if it's done,
Right.
put it the right perspective.
And there are times when it can be used sparingly and
Yeah.
have more impact than if it's continuous from start to finish. And
Yeah, but I think Danny has this pop kind of a thing where he just drives the music, and then
yep,
on the scenes he doesn't use anything. So that's one of a style which I really love.
exactly. And it is a great film. I just watched it again the other night, and boy, it holds up beautifully. You have had some really fascinating collaborations. You collaborated with the composer Craig Armstrong on Shekhar Kapoor's Elizabeth: The Golden Age. Now that must have been very strange. That's a very different kind of environment that you were trying to capture, and you were working collaboratively with another composer. Was that a comfortable relationship?
Very similar to Lord of the Rings, because Vatana, the Finnish band, was also working with me, so it's not new. I love Craig's music, and I admired his stuff. Very nice man, and he gave me a room in his in his place in Scotland. And the thing was, I think that time the director was in London, and we would send stuff, and they would listen to it, and we used to get all the cues bounced. I said, "What's going on? I think we're writing well. Everything is bounced. They're not taking a decision." So I said, "I'm going to go, Craig. I'm going to go sit next to Shaker's room." So I went there, played him in good speakers. Everything was like, "Oh, that's good. That's good." That's good. So sometimes I feel like when they they have to listen to the right perspective. And my music is always like I do sketches, and it comes together in the very final, when I deliver it. And the directors whom I work with understand. When new people come in, oh my God, what is he giving? It's too sketchy. And so that's one thing. Even in Hollywood, I had issues, not issues. I'd imagine, okay, this is what I should do. I should produce it in a better way and show it to them. Unlike, because I remember, like, even John Williams, when he scores, he just plays the stuff on piano, and Spielberg would understand that, and you'd wait for the scoring. Those days are gone now. Now everybody wants an amazing temp
Right.
scored on keyboards, and yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
It's all samples, and so that you get
Yeah.
a sense of what the orchestration is going to be like. And if you haven't yet decided what the orchestration is going to be like, well, just tough. You have to. I'd like to sort of move a little differently and talk a little bit about the spiritual dimension of your work and your concerts of Sufi music and so on. And maybe as a way into that, one of the winners of our Glenn Gould Prize is Philip Glass, and he said to me when we were together for the prize that he didn't so much feel as though he was creating the music, but that the music already existed out there, and that his training and his hard work made him a receptive vessel for the music to enter and flow through. Is that a point of view that you can empathize with, that you can feel some relationship with that kind of approach?
It's true. I think we all have to be the vessel, and the vessel has to be clean. The vessel has to be empty to receive the blessings. I keep saying that, which has to be worthy enough, and worthy enough. The mind. The mind is the vessel,
Yes.
and when the vessel is unclean, definitely the work suffers. Because music making has got so much with the other realm, and what we are living is the physical realm, and the metaphysical one, which can you tap into it, and what are the rules to be ready for it, to tap into it.
Yes.
And this is not, music doesn't teach you this. Music doesn't teach you this. That comes with experience, that comes with instinct, that comes with a kind of practice where you just go into the zone, and that zone is where everything is clear. You have a blank paper.
Yes.
If the paper already has filled stuff, then it's going to be something which is already being printed. That's going to
Right.
come in already. If you want a
Yep.
fresh thing to be written, there will be a blank paper. And why I'm saying this is, we all have instincts, and sometimes when you do music, you need to use both the tricks. Sometimes you have certain generic music which, oh, I know how to do this.
Yeah.
Ostinatos with the boomer, and then cellos. We need that, and sometimes you need, wait. I need a melody which is unheard of, and this progression should go deep into the mind and change people. And for that, you need courage.
Mm-hmm.
The courage of not using too many instruments. It could be just one instrument. And for that, again, that's when I think what Philip Glass told, like, I can totally understand the practice of taming your mind, the practice of studying it, the practice of being receptive and
Mm-hmm.
cleansing your vessel. Yeah.
That's very beautifully said, and it reminds me, actually, since we are the Glenn Gould Foundation, something that Gould said, which is that the purpose of art is not that momentary burst of excitement, but the careful and deliberate lifelong construction of a state of wonder and serenity. And it seems to me that from the opposite point of view, that you have to kind of find your way into a mindset of serenity and wonder to discover the music that you're capable of having enter you and flow through you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, when did you first have the idea of touring with programs of Sufi music? Because obviously, there are, concert tours that you've had, world tours that are mostly your film music, the things that are very popular, and so on. And it seems to me that in some ways, from a what if someone were giving you, career advice, they'd say, "My boy, go out there and do the shows with the fireworks and the big displays and the hit songs. Why are you, why do you want to go and do sacred music? That's not a big audience. You're not going to have the kind of success that you can have." But first of all, they have been very successful, but also, it really is such a wonderful compliment to the more, you know, mainstream commercial aspect of your musical life. I found those concerts, the videos that I've seen, intensely moving and very, very beautiful. So where did the idea come from of bringing that to the public?
The whole thing happened when one of my friends gave me a CD once and said, "Hey, listen to this." And it was Peter Gabriel's Mast Mast of Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan Sahab. I think it was produced by Peter Brooks. Peter Brooks, right? And I listened to this and I was like, man, this is stuff which I've never heard. And what languages? It was Punjabi, I think. And it was Punjabi, Sindhi, and Farsi and Arabic. And I never heard. And I was coming to Sufi, kind of was trying to tend to. And then so I could hear familiar things. Ali, Ali, Mast, Mast, and Mast Kalandar, and Dam Mast Kalandar. And apparently Dam is actually means Adam. So the deep spiritual meaning of, like, we all come from one source. So yeah, so when I was listening to it, I was like, can I do that? And I was like obsessive about what is this Punjabi language and what is this Sindhi language and who can write this? And I was asking everyone, like my friends in Bombay. I said, I need a Punjabi lyricist. And then this whole thing opened up. Baba Bulle Shah was a Sufi in Punjab, and what he's written. And then Amir Khusru Rahmatullah, Nizamuddin Awliya, Khwaja Garib. These are all Sufi saints. And their sayings are all about unity, about love, about finding the mystic, finding, joining with the ultimate. And then one of my friends, one of the directors who came in, he was editor of Filmfare, like the famous magazine. He said, I'm doing a movie and I know that I can't afford you, but can you do one song? Usually I don't do that. And I was like looking at him, and he was a very nice man. And I said, what are the songs? And he said, I need a song like Muqabla, which is a pop number. Can you do that? I said, what else is there? Because I've done enough of that. There's a Sufi song. I'm going to go to this composer. I said, I'll do that. And so I used to go to the Sufi shrine called Haji Ali, which is in the sea. Literally, you had to go to the sea. There's a shrine beautifully surrounded. I said, okay, let me do a Haji Ali Kawali. And I came up with the Pia Haji Ali. And then I met Shaukat, who's one of my faculty for Sufi ensemble at KM. I asked him to write, and then he wrote the stuff, and we had done this in 7/8 rhythm, and my life changed. So I finished this, and I went to London. One of the doctors I met, Indian guy, I think, he said, I'm the doctor for Prince Charles. You know what happened? And he said, what happened? My car was going, and I was listening to your song. Something happened, and the car overturned, but nothing happened to us, and your song was still playing. I said, oh my God, I got gooseflesh. And there's Sufi, the incantations and the spiritual power of it. He was like going on it, like, I said, this is my future.
Yeah. Which song was that?
Pia Haji Ali, Pia Haji Ali. It's the Pia Haji Ali is the
right.
The saint.
Okay. Yes. You've proven that not only can Sufi music find its way beautifully into this kind of film context, but you could actually have hits with it. For example, Kun Faya Kun in Rockstar, I was looking at that and listening to many different performances of that song. But the clip from the film on YouTube has 345 million views.
Oh, wow, really?
That's a hit in anyone's book. Yes, and of course.
Think about music is whether it's gospel or whether it's a bhajan or it's a qawwali. I think the sincerity of it and the purity of it, where it comes from, defines what it could do.
Yes.
The intention of the piece, actually, whether you listen to Beethoven or whether you listen to Meera, Lata Mangeshkar singing that, or Kawali, like what we've done,
Hmm.
I felt like it's beyond religion, and people know that. Even if they try to polarize things, inside your eye of the heart knows what to see. And I took that as a guidance that even recently we did a concert for the Lightmen, to fundraise for the Lightmen.
Hmm.
I was skeptical. I said, at a time when things are very polarized, not everybody. I'm just saying, like, would people accept this me singing? And the other gentleman centrally said, no, no, don't worry, people are. And I thought 500 people are going to come for the concert. Then 6,000 people came.
Yes.
6,000 people came, and they all sang along. And that's when I realized, beyond all the description, beyond all the human people trying to divide people, humans trying to divide people, if the purity is and the intention is pure in anything you do, that succeeds. And for that you need courage. And also Sufi, if you look at the Sufi shrines in India, mostly 50% Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, everybody go. I think they understand what it stands for. It stands for unity and unconditional love and giving, and they don't judge. Like the Rumi poem says, like, there is a place beyond good things and bad things, and I'm going to see you there. That's
That's great.
so good.
Beautiful.
And we're all judging people with this is right, whether it's in
Yeah.
music also, like, oh, this is right, this is wrong.
Right.
Finally it's the heart which decides what is good, what is bad. Interesting quote, it says that uh, intelligent people don't have taste. Intellectuals don't have taste.
Right.
So when you
That's
overanalyze something, you forget the joy of receiving, the joy of what it is. Let it be what it is.
that is so true. I've often felt that, one of the worst things to be if you love art is to become a critic, because you have to become so obsessed with coming across as sophisticated and knowing everything that you can never actually enjoy anything.
Yeah, I've directed um, a sensory project which is 37-minute and it's on VR. So kind of learned the whole process of story writing and shooting and production design and this and that. So one thing which if I had to sleep well, I said, switch off all that when you're working for some other people.
Right.
Don't see the editing, don't see the camera, enjoy the movie, do your job as a composer and shut up.
Right. don't let don't let the details get in the way of the whole.
Absolutely.
Right. Let's talk about, because the concept of purity of intention, that and the spiritual journey carries over into your approach to philanthropy and education. And I do want to talk about the KM Music Academy. It's your creation. It has created some incredible opportunities for gifted young musicians and people who come to you who aren't musicians when they start and become musicians. Many cases from very financially, economically less advantaged backgrounds. And how did the idea of creating this institution come about? And also tell us about the Sunshine Orchestra. Those are the two aspects that I'm really curious to learn more about.
I think what happened was my obsession with technology. I used to buy these big consoles, like £500,000 and all the stuff. And then after 2 years, I'd say, how much will it sell for? It's not even 20% or 15% of what it go. And so, like, why am I putting so much of money in this stuff? Of course, I need the consoles. But what if I invest in people, like, nurturing, get the fishing rods for these people, not get the fish, but the fishing rods. And that is empowering them with knowledge and instruments and all this stuff. So I think it was 2008, I called one of my colleagues and said, hey, I'm going to start a music school and I'm going to give it free. He said, no, 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 don't do that. Nothing free is valued unless they pay for it. He was like a businessman. And so we said, we went ahead on my birthday or my marriage day or something. We announced we're going to start this. I don't know anything about it, but I want this to happen in Chennai, because if I don't do it, I think nobody's going to do it. I was waiting for people to do it. And also the musicians who were there playing strings and brass were getting really old. They were my father's generation, actually. I said, what's going to happen to this? We just announced it, and then it's like, you know, uh, the bees coming to the honey. Like everybody started coming. So I told my mom was very good in construction. So I need a place to for these kids, and there was a car shed. She got a building up in 2 months, and yeah, we started the school. Then I realized um, the only way you can have instruments like strings and brass, because India's youngest country now, like kind of thing, and why would they become a violin player? It's so hard, and it didn't tally with me. Like younger people want to climb up faster, they want to become famous faster. I said, why don't we pull this 80% of the population who are poor? Why don't we get them and give that empowerment so that they can cross that social barrier, get and also be stick with what we are trying to achieve in orchestra. In a very Indian classical country, how can you bring harmony and symphonic music? I thought of this idea as I thought it will work because they're going to be, hopefully they'll be grateful for the education. And wanted India to cut all these barriers of caste and all the stuff, and poor and rich and all the stuff, and be united through music. And then it took me like definitely around 6 7 years. We fell again and again, and then suddenly we got up very strong, and these kids are now ambassadors for my music and for my conservatory, the Sunshine Orchestra. And of course we have the foundation, um, you know the amazing opera singers and composers. And and also realized that a school is not just educating them. It's a kind of place, it's a shrine where they exchange ideas and they mingle, they know about each other's stories. There's a lot of human fusion happening there. And when I went to Berkeley, actually I took my kids just for the heck of it. They did a summer program. They were like in the cheesecake factory and they were enjoying. I said, yeah, do that, and then you learn about life, you learn about other people, the world, cultures, and how to deal with things. And one of my daughters were wearing the niqab, right? She does that. And she was, of course, you had that people have a stigma against covering. And I was watching everything, how people, I was like sitting in a chair and watching them cross what kind of stigma goes through and what their understanding how to deal with things. And yeah, so the school, the conservatory is that. And one thing also, another thing I realized is if you teach classical music, that's not enough, because the challenges of the new world is different. If somebody is running Pro Tools, these people should know what he's doing there. They should understand, oh, he's put another track and I'm going to overdub, or this tempo's not singing with the click track, so I need to play that again. The dynamics could be better. If they know that, they're going to be better players. And what is it used for? And that's what a school should now teach, rather than just sticking to. And yeah, and then how to talk in the public and
Right.
all that stuff. Yeah.
It's something that I actually feel very passionately about. It's something that I'm very critical about most Western music conservatories, is that they teach the kids how to play their instrument, how to interpret the music. It's a wonderful training from that point of view. In terms of the reality of
Yeah.
making music in the modern world, how do you build a career? How do you promote your career? How do you work in a studio? How do you make a record? Like, as if you, even if you're not producing and engineering your own record, how are you expected to behave in the studio to generate the best possible result? None of that is included. And it's, so the kids get out of school and, all they can think of is, I have to get into a symphony orchestra. I have to be a freelance, studio musician. I have to join a band. But, I don't know how to do any of those things, but I'm really good at playing my instrument.
Yeah. So I think the past for few years, I think you see so much of YouTube. There's so much of education outside, conservatory. So,
Yes.
and yeah, that's one thing I always felt like, how I'm responsible for these kids' futures, and I don't want to be blamed by them saying that I went to this conservatory, I studied this. And I also said like, India never had a music supervision course. India never had a music editing course. I said, these are jobs waiting for you guys, because
Yes.
all the burden comes on the composer or the director. Why should we take like 15 jobs what other people can earn? And
Yes.
that's how I pitch the school. Like, you learn a violin or a cello, you understand what music is.
Right.
You can become a sound editor. you can judge something in a TV series. So you have the musical knowledge, and you're learning about musicality, research, and social concept, and how it's yeah, these
Right.
things.
And you have the flexibility because of the Western music that's part of the training to flow into different areas, different career opportunities that may either still be in India or outside of India. So it's very flexible.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It also reminds me very much, and this is something I have a long personal relationship with, which is the South American El Sistema
Yes.
program, which
Yeah.
and I don't know whether you've um, developed any connections to them, but that's something that if you'd ever like to explore, I'd be happy to act as a bit of a go-between, because I've worked with them for many, many years, going back to my own record label days.
That'd be great.
They would love to work with KM. I know they would. Anyway, I have one other thing, and it's an interesting question. And that is, you are now a legitimate celebrity, musical star, icon, and when you perform in what I call the concerts of your hit music, you have to basically adopt the swagger of essentially the rock musician and the persona of a celebrity. Um, but on the other hand, you come from a spiritual tradition that you feel very deeply, and that embraces humility and reverence. And one of the things that is common to most great spiritual traditions is you have a kind of an exalted respect and celebration of that which is highest and most holy, however you understand it. And along with that, there is the goal of overcoming the self, of
Hmm.
by making the ego somehow take a back seat. You can basically then free yourself to embrace the infinite. Um, these two things seem to be directly contradictory with each other. If you don't mind my saying so, I'm not saying that to be critical. It's just
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
how do you reconcile those two impulses? It must be very strange in a way.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, actually. So, my wife takes care of my styling, and it's a duty of a husband to fulfill the wife's desire, right? So she is like, you have to be a rock star. When you stand on the stage, you should be like this. I said, okay, you take the reins and do whatever you want. I'll wear that. I'll throw it after the concert. That's it. During the concert, I wear all that stuff, and so she's happy, and she
Yes,
does all the styling, and I have my limits what I do on stage. No, like
right,
I do, not like other people. I mean, each one has a personality. My personality is this, and my audience knows this. This is what my thing is, and we have fun.
right,
Music is about, and because the music is fun music. The music demands certain kind of a vibe, and I
right.
can't just be like, yeah,
You can't be serious all the time, and as long as you establish some boundaries, you can
yeah.
stay within those. And that makes sense. That does make sense. So before we finish, I mean, there are so many other things that I'd love to talk with you about, but we've touched on the very central role of technology. I mean, 100 years ago, you know there was essentially the technology was the instrument themselves. Or I have actually in my office, you can see behind me, you know one of the few early innovations in music technology. That's an Edison cylinder, which involves 4 minutes of music on a wax cylinder.
Oh,
Yes,
really?
yeah, 4 minutes. This is from about 1906, and I
I've never
have to
seen
say
that.
that I always, before they came up with flat discs, Edison had these,
Oh, wow.
and the um, and of course they sound awful. They really do. um, but I do have to say one thing, and that is, if there is a power failure and it lasts long enough that everyone else's batteries are gone on their phones and their devices, I can still make music, because this is purely mechanical. It doesn't have an amplifier, it doesn't have a speaker, it has a horn. Anyway, the point is that technology has really transformed how we create music, how we hear music, how we share music, how we, conceive of music. Every
And
aspect.
now we have
Has,
AI. We have AI.
yes. That, well, I was going to get to that. Like, do you feel that AI is, a threat, or is
I
it something
think
that we
it's
can?
the Napster of creativity again. What
Uh,
Napster did to CDs, and how the music industry had to do everything, reboot, I think
Right.
we have come to another stage. It's going to be chaos. It's going to be
Right.
so noisy.
Right. Well, hopefully there will never be an AI AR. So that would be bad. But you have really embraced technology. I think you were the first person to go to 7.1 sound in your scoring. And I have to say that in listening to your recordings, the quality of production is absolutely immaculate. It's beautifully produced. The realization is very, very polished and expressive. um, you clearly are someone who has never basically looked at a new piece of equipment and said, take it away. I don't want to learn something new. That's me. I'm a technophobe. Um, you know, does it feel like fun? Is it like a journey to explore the new capabilities when there's a new piece of software or a new piece of gear that comes into your life?
I mean, if it's going to make my life easy, like
Yeah,
sometimes if it's going to take 14 steps to get at something, and then there's something which should make it 2 steps, and it increases the productivity
yeah,
without compromising, and you can use that time for something else. Otherwise, the more you get old, you can't sit and your back starts paining.
right,
So I think the tools are going to make me young, make my music younger, and the age factor won't reflect on the music, and it'll be better even more
right,
and more
right, right. And you
vibrant.
start to think saving time
Yeah.
actually counts, because we ultimately are all counting backwards, right, from an end point. Um, Last couple of questions: studio versus stage. Glenn Gould was really happiest in the studio. He felt that it was a controlled environment. It was secure. He could go more deeply into the music. He could craft it. It wasn't depending on the chance of the moment in front of an audience. Do you feel a kinship to that point of view? Do you see separate satisfactions between the studio and performing live?
I think live has its own highs, and it could get, when it's troublesome, uh, you are also controlling a mob, a good mob and a bad mob. A good
Right.
mob can become a bad mob if something bad happens. So but it's fun when it all goes well. Because if
Yes.
people are going to show up in your concert, they're going to buy tickets, they already love you 50%.
Yep.
And all you have to do is perform well, then you're sold. If they're going to show up for your concert, like, 20,000 people or 30,000 people showing up for your concert is such a, amazing thing. Not everybody gets that. And so, and also, I never look back at my compositions. I just, all awards, like, I'm done with it. I don't know whether I'm going to compose a tune tomorrow. So that's my next challenge. I'm more bothered about that rather than thinking about the past.
Right.
So the only time I look back is, oh, I got a concert. So let's see what impresses me. Oh, that stuff is great. This stuff is great. I can do this. I can change the arrangement or play it on the piano. And that's when I look back and then take stuff.
Yep.
So I like both, actually. And first couple of decades, it was like death going on stage. You don't know
Uh-huh.
what's going to fail, who's not going to show up, and which promoter won't pay. And now I think all that is sorted. Is much better now.
Right. Because I do sense that you are, in your deepest nature, you're a quiet and a contemplative person, a thoughtful person. And you have to basically find the extrovert in you, the outgoing person, to be on stage. And congratulations, you've been able to make that transition. That's great.
My question is, like, if people are coming, they're paying for your concert, and they are going to a Beyonce concert, they're going to a something else. Why should they get something less?
Hmm.
And so why can't we up the game? And what would I like to see if I see an AR Rahman concert? You know,
Right.
I always think like that. Oh, I like to see this. I like to see it
Yes.
presented well. I like good videos. I like to see great arrangements, great singing, and we are very proud of it rather than cringing when you say, "Oh, it is what it
Yeah,
is."
yeah, 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 yeah. Absolutely. So in closing, actually came across a quote of yours that I really loved, and I want to read it and then ask one last question. Music is the language of languages. It is the ultimate mother of languages. Film music in India is like pop music in the West. Movies are the channels for this music, but music stays on long after the films. if a music artiste wants to blossom as a full-fledged person, it is not enough if he only knows classical music, nor is it enough if he's well-versed in only in ragas and techniques. Instead, he should be a knowledgeable person interested in life and philosophy. In his personal life, there should be, at least in some corner of his heart, a tinge of lingering sorrow. That makes me think of Johannes Brahms or Robert Schumann or even Beethoven. But that's a very beautiful sentiment about how music
Thank
has
you.
to embrace more than just the technique of music, but the whole range of life experiences, including the sad ones.
Yeah, I think empathy, whatever you have for life and other humans, comes through music, and it evokes it, right?
Yes,
And if that is actually the spiritual power of belief, whatever you believe in or you don't believe in, we all believe in humanity. We all believe in the joy of others. Otherwise, life will never go through. No civilization will exist if we are not
correct.
happy with, by the joy of giving. And I think music kind of augments that stuff in a person when they listen to it, and the world becomes
Absolutely.
more beautiful. Like when you're going
Yes.
through a very very unclean road, you just put beautiful music. Even that looks beautiful, right?
Yes,
So
absolutely. Well, you've done it all. Well over 200 film scores, concerts that attract, tens and tens of thousands of people. You've, opened the world of Sufi music to audiences around the world who weren't familiar with it before. You've helped to educate, and you've collaborated with some of the most enormous names in music, Michael Jackson and Mick Jagger and so on. So my last question is, what lies ahead, and is there a Mount Everest that you still are looking forward to scaling? What is there a dream project that you still are hoping lies ahead for you?
just when you think everything's over, something else opens up.
Uh-huh.
So now I'm very fascinated about the meta world and what you can do with that, with music, and how you can there's certain limitations when you have certain things in real life which you can go ahead and do with the meta world.
Right.
And what are those possibilities, what is the sound of that, is what I'm exploring now.
Interesting, interesting. Well, so in that case, we look forward to the next virtual you in that metaverse. That's great. And thank you again for the gift of music that you've given, for being so generous and giving us so much time to talk today. And of course, we'll all be following, the next and the next and the next project that you take on with the greatest interest. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Great honor.
Thank you.
The Glenn Gould Foundation is a registered Canadian charity, and we rely on the support of arts lovers like you to keep bringing inspiring stories to life. Please consider giving by visiting our website, glengould.ca, and follow us across social media at the Glenn Gould Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of The Gould Standard.